Welcome to Tales She Told Me, a podcast featuring ordinary women who have overcome and done extraordinary things. I'm your host, Farrah Haidar. Joining me today is Tanya Gioia. Tanya's story revolves around addiction and what it does to families, something she has a lot of experience with. In 2010, 5 days before Christmas, Tanya's husband got sober. Feeling like all of her prayers were answered, Tanya thought her life would finally start to improve. A present father for her children, a partner for her, financial stability. It was all around the corner, right? Well, her joy was short-lived, as a temporary restraining order left her with more work than ever, including caring for 2 kids, 2 horses, 400 chickens, and a dog on 20 lonely acres of land in a big, big house at Christmas. This crisis would teach her about faith, tenacity, and how to drive a plow truck. Tanya, I know that short introduction probably doesn't do justice to your story, so I'm going to let you add some detail. How did you end up on this vast farm alone with so much responsibility?
Farrah, I really appreciate you going through the intro like that. It is, we're sitting here in 2023, and I just listened to your podcast about being 20 years married. So we are 20 years married next month.
Oh, congrats. It's a long time.
And we have, it is. And I loved your, when you're pointing out the mythology around what marriage is was fantastic. And that's what I do with addiction, is point out the mythology that the world has created for us. So how did I get there? Well, it was a joint commitment. We met on a guest ranch. I showed up with a boyfriend, and my now husband said, "No, I knew you were going to marry me."
Yeah.
And he knew it, but I didn't know it. So we had housing, but we were bringing in our second child, and we were living in one of those studio type housing things. And of course, being the mother hen and nesting and all those things, and I'm like, we've got to do something. So bless his heart, my husband was working full time, and a lot of people work 10 to 12 hours. So he's working 10 to 12 hours. He's doing this on the weekends. He's GCing he's general contracting the whole thing. We've got some people who are working with us, and I'm building a baby. He's building a house. We're going in separate directions. And, we look at substance abuse and we can see the addict. What we don't look at is how flippin' crazy the other person is. So I am trying to control everything. We finally move into that house, and by a year from that date, we're separated. I'm driving a plow truck. I'm caring for 400 chickens. We are at the point of just the gift of desperation. Yeah. And so it was a dream between the both of us, but I don't know, Farrah, if you've ever gotten a dream and you're like, wow, I don't think I really wanted this.
Yeah, a couple of times.
So I'm looking at that 20 acres, and you think you don't have neighbors, right? You think you don't have neighbors, but we do. We have 4 different neighbors, and 20 acres sounds like a lot of space, but we have 4 different neighbors, and I have a boxer dog who is running this neighbor's alpacas, chasing that neighbor's dog, and running up and staring in the window of the neighbor behind us. So not only am I managing all of this, I have to go back to work. I hadn't been working full time, but with the separation, with all the things that were going on, I had to go back to work. So it's one of those things where you're like, God, thanks for answering my prayer, I think.
Yep.
Because we've gotten to this point where I'm like, okay, you answered it, but now I'm totally overwhelmed.
Oh my God. So tell me about the temporary restraining order. Like, where did that come from?
So I don't know how much your audience knows about any level of domestic violence or anything like that. What happens when the police are called in a situation is somebody is leaving.
Yeah.
And so I call this cops, courts, and chickens.
Yeah.
So somebody is leaving, and my husband was gracious enough to say, me. Now, how you really, you watch all the cop dramas and all those things like that. It's not the same. It could be ugly words. It could be, angry accusations, all those types of things. It doesn't have to be that. And I reached out for help. It was the first time I had reached out for help. Now, my husband is a very gentle and kind man, but degeneration of addiction can cause some very dramatic things to happen. And the person who came to help me said, we need more intervention.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened there. And then here's the blessing. All right. So I really want folks to hear this. Here's the blessing. As Einstein says, you can't solve the problem with the same mind you went in with. So the temporary restraining order meant that we could only text each other about the children. So instead of the same mind keep trying to chisel away at this problem that we had no idea how to solve, it got quiet for 3 months. And that was the blessing right there. We couldn't talk to each other. We could only text through about the children. And most people would say, oh, that's awful, awful, awful. It wasn't. It was important. We both needed that cooling off period. And I must say, I do a clean podcast, so I'm going to keep this really clean. I must say, you had the fill in the words, but I was a cranky, bent for leather, bleepity bleep. And, I was doing crazy things like I shot some guns off in the backyard. I was throwing food out the back door. This is where you come to a point where you realize that you are not well, they are not well.
Mm-hmm.
And that cooling off period let us both begin to see we didn't want to be these people. And we had 3 and 5-year-old boys at the time. We didn't want to be these people for these boys.
Yeah. So it's so interesting that you refer to the dynamic, because that's actually one thing I kind of noticed in your story is you talk a lot about how the family plays a role in the addict's addiction. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on it, like how you saw your role in your husband's addiction and maybe how you saw a way out of it after this cooling off period.
Sure. And this is where I love to talk about it. So I didn't cause, cure, or could control his addiction.
Of course. Yeah.
I didn't do that, right? And I'm going to free everybody that you didn't do that. But here's what I want to say about myself. I didn't marry him because I was well. I had been married before. It had been a 5-year span between. I thought I had done a lot of healing, but I had not really done the healing I needed to do. And I needed to control everybody in any relationship I was in. Farrah, if you and I were in a relationship, I would set up some controlling things, but they were not boundaries. So controlling is different from boundaries. I needed to control what you did and how you did it and where you did it and what was going on so that I could feel safe, because I wasn't willing to deal with my own hurt, my own childhood trauma, the things that I needed to deal with. I was more than ready to work on you, right? So if I fixed you, then I would be happy. Now, what do we know about changing people? That's a lost cause, right? Yeah. You can change you and then they have to respond. You talked about that in your marriage podcast, which I thought was excellent. And what I needed to do, we had begun to do. I had gone to Al-Anon, he was going to AA, but then as the babies came and the house got built, as life began to come in on us, we forgot our most important responsibility. And I'll put it in these terms of, as my husband Jerry got sober, if you look at the prodigal son story, and this is where the prodigal takes all his inheritance, runs away, parties, does all this hard stuff, but he's very clear that he has crossed the line, been disrespectful, been dishonest, and he comes home and the father welcomes him home. The person who never gets it is the righteous older brother who says, well, I've done what you told me to do, and I followed the law, and I've done the things that are right, and you didn't even give me as much as a goat to go celebrate with. Well, he never gets it. He never gets it that he's part of the problem. And that's what happens in the family is when the person who has had the quote unquote addiction gets well and you drop them back in a dysfunctional family system, how are they supposed to function? So
Yeah.
that's what I love to talk about is this didn't happen out of nowhere. And I had a lot of responsibility, not for creating it, but for perpetuating it based on my needs. Because when he came home and wanted to be a full adult, financially responsible, wanted to take care of the kids, all these things that I've been doing all by myself, I'm like, who are you to do that? I'm queen of this universe.
Mm-hmm.
So as we began to work through, we did separate counseling. We began to do couples counseling. We both went to our AA Al-Anon meetings. We did some joint things, and then we helped start a Celebrate Recovery group in the small town we were in. And contact me. I'd be happy to walk you through what all these things really are.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of work, and I would say the biggest thing was to say, we can't keep this a secret anymore. We have to turn to other people in our community and say, we need help.
Yeah.
And that's what most families don't do. They run back into their little segment, and either they're too embarrassed, or they're worried about what people will think, or they don't have the community. That's a lot of it, that they won't go and get the help they need. That growth, you can't do that growth on your own. You have to have community.
So I have a question here, which is like, when you look back at kind of the path that led you to that moment, what do you think? How do you see the addiction played into your life? Like, how did you slip into that mode?
So how I was already there. I was already that person who needed to control everything in my environment so I could be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I already was that person. And then to layer on top of it, coming into a marriage with someone who desperately, here's the interesting thing about addiction, it works until it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So addiction is the solution. Think about it. I drink because I don't want to deal with my feelings. I use marijuana because it makes me feel better and I can tolerate the kids and my nagging wife or whatever is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be as simple as workaholism. I go to work because I'm valued at work. When I go home, people are nasty to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the solution. Here, the work that I really like is by Gabor Mate. And what he says is, the definition of addiction is something that we do that takes us away from pain and into pleasure, even though in the long term it will cause us enormous damage. So that you can place anything in there. And what he says is, where's the pain? Where's the pain? What neediness, attachment do you need from the other person that you are running to? So if you're going to look at me as an addict, and I could self-label that way, mine is relationship addiction. I need you to confirm that I'm okay. I need you to confirm my worth. I need you to confirm that you're okay so I can be okay. How did I get there? Childhood trauma.
Mm. So you talked a little bit about going out and sharing with others that you needed help, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of families don't do that. Can you describe, like, what in your experience it is that prevents families from doing that? Obviously, there's probably some shame there, but I'm sure there are other really valid reasons, and how you kind of overcame that willingness, or overcame that lack of willingness to share it with others.
Uh, for in my particular story, I had the gift of desperation. I
Mm-hmm.
was at the point where I needed help with childcare so I could go to work. I needed money. I needed food on the table. We were in extreme lack at that point. That we got to the point where there was no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, there were courts and cops involved, so it was published in the paper. I mean, there's no hiding anymore that this was going on. We had already begun to establish we had a relationship with our church, but we'd already been going to Al-Anon and AA, and we could go in there and say,
Yeah.
we're stuck, and then had to sign up for some of the social services, for Medicaid, for all those other things. I mean, we were at that point. we couldn't hide it anymore. For people, here's where when you don't have the gift of desperation, you're like, Tanya, I don't want to get there. Why they don't do it, I believe was your question, is one, if you're the righteous older brother, it's not my problem, it's their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I work with families about is, no, every addict affects 5 other people intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So it is your problem. Now, getting them straight, is that it? But creating the environment that will make that even easier is really what needs to happen. So with COVID provided us a lot of good things. There's all kinds of things online where you can start checking this out online. I really recommend going to one of the groups, working with a coach, working with a therapist, because here's the deal. What you are seeing is the top of the iceberg.
Yep.
The rest of it is completely underneath. And I was just talking to a client before we got on, and she was so astute. She was seeing all kinds of things, but there were some blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
So here is why people don't go. Like you said, embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
What will my family think of me? This is not a big deal. We'll just work through it, you know? And then the other reason they don't go is it's not their problem. It's this person's problem. So then you have child kicked out of the house, divorce happening, parent ostracized, all those types of things that break down the relationship, because quite frankly, we'd rather keep the conflict going and not out ourselves as part of the problem and justify ourselves than to say, no, I'd rather have full peace and move towards a generational legacy of loving, caring, joyful family.
So here's my question, right? Like, so you had this moment, there was a restraining order, you had 3 months of quiet, things came back, you guys started working. Often when I hear these stories, it's kind of like there was this pivotal moment, and then people did the work, and it was all great after that. And I just don't believe the last part. I'm sure there were moments after you had that where maybe you guys regressed or you had a pivotal twist or something. Can you tell us about some of those moments?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked. So let me string it out a little bit longer. So the quiet lasted for 3 months, right? But we were separated for 23 months.
Okay.
We couldn't even begin to counsel together by court order. We couldn't begin to counsel together until 12 months after the incident in our state. That's just how they set it up. The enormous things we did, we went to the Betty Ford's Children's Program for our children twice. We did the Incredible Years twice. We did private counseling through all of that, went to our respective meetings through all of that. But apropos to your question is, I've been likening this, and I'm not sure this lands, but I've been working on this. So we all get excited about a wedding, right? And we're there, and there's excitement. There's a big lead up to it. It's the activating event, and then people go on with their lives, right? Well, the wedding is exciting, and it's a good thing, and it's happening, just like sobriety happens. Boom, happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen that quickly, but it did for me. Well, then we've got 40 or 50 years to continue, right?
Yep.
So we are with sobriety, it's just taking off that top layer, like the wedding does, getting the ceremonial stuff done. Then the hard work is the next part of the work. And I tell you what, the first year we were really careful with each other. First year we moved back in together. We were really careful with each other, really gentle with each other. We were both doing our work. Then we got back into a routine. Third year is, I've seen this in other couples too, is when you kind of look at each other and you go, okay, it's kind of like the third year marriage. Okay, we've been doing this for a while and the conflicts didn't go away.
Yeah.
The, mortgage or the rent still has to be paid. We have to go to work. Now we've got 8 and 10-year-olds, I think it would have been. They need this, they need that. It didn't go away. We got to a point with enough training that most of the time we could separate out the people from the problem. meaning, we
Yeah.
could focus on the problem itself rather than calling each other out on it and this is your fault and blaming and shaming
Mm-hmm.
and all those types of things. Then the next big break was almost 10 years later. We needed to move for my husband's job. He had really taken his life and really he had gone 5 or 6 steps off the ladder in the company he was working for, and we needed to move. We agreed to do that. We were doing that shift, and then some financial infidelity happened, and I'm like, where's this coming from? And so I had to reset boundaries and I had to say, I'm not doing this. You've got to take care of this. And we had to work through that again. The real positive of that is we hired somebody to work with us on a Dave Ramsey style budget. We've been secure, we've been comfortable, but until that point, until that break. And so what I encourage people to do is see these breaks as opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while, Farrah, that was a real break. We
Yeah.
weren't sure we were going to pull through that because, with most couples, it's sex and money. How does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Then further down the line, as my oldest turned 13, we were really struggling with some of his behaviors and how to manage that. And he was in therapy because we've got our little antenna up going, okay, we're a family that comes from trauma. We've got
Mm-hmm.
this addiction, we've got these things going on. And I'll tell you the real heartbreak is he had worked with a therapist that we dearly loved for a while. And she came to me and she said, your house is not emotionally safe enough for him to do his deep work in.
Um,
If you could have shot the sword through my heart, that was it. So then I went into really deep therapy. And this is why I know this is not just, oh, he's the addict if he gets well. Well, he was well. I was crazy. I hadn't done the deeper work that I needed to do. So I went into EMDR, which is rapid eye movement
mm-hmm.
therapy that deals with the childhood trauma. And then my house rewrited itself. My son began to act better,
Yeah.
which really was, yes, his actions changed, but he wasn't the one doing the therapy. So does that answer your question? We didn't
Yeah.
just walk out of there and go, okay, all fine. We had a lot more work to do.
Yeah. No, and that's why I asked the question because I know that to be the case. Like it must be. And I just like to illustrate it for the audience. But I have a question for you. Why, what made you try so hard? I mean, I think a lot of people just said, I'm going to leave this marriage.
It's not fair. You're asking the right question. It's a question I've asked myself.
Mm-hmm.
And as I told you, I've been married before. So there's I'm one of my superpowers is tenacity, as I'm going to stick with it until I figure it out. So there's a compilation of that. I'll tell you three. I think it's three reasons. One, I'd been married before, and I thought, you know what, Tanya, if you pull out of this, you're just going to go find somebody else that you're going to have to work out these same issues with because it's not about him; it's about you
True. Mm-hmm.
working out your issues. So that's one. Um, the children, I would say, was one, but not really, because that's what our therapist said. He said, if you're staying in this for the kids, they're better off with you building your lives elsewhere. So I
Mm-hmm.
encourage people not to do that. But I knew that I wanted a whole family. So what did I need to change to maintain that whole family? Where did I need to step in and do my part?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last little piece is my faith. So people will talk about hearing God, and I was really, I'll give you a clear picture of it. I was really angry in the shower, pounding on the shower wall. This was after we had recommitted. We did a whole recommitment ceremony. We got married again, all those types of things, couple probably in the third or fourth year, pounding on the wall. And not the audible voice, but God said in my heart, child, you will stay married.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay. And that confirmed for me the higher power was in this with us. This was a three legged stool. We were not standing on our own. God was looking to bless us. what did I need to do to connect all these things together?
Yeah, I mean, I know you listen to my podcast about marriage, but that's what I said. Marriage is about growth. It's and I think once you accept that and you stop expecting it to be all about making you happy, it gets a lot easier, and you find that these opportunities, right? These opportunities to grow and to become better and to do some of your own work. So that's yeah. So I can definitely relate to it. Do you brought up your children and some, you had these struggles when he was 13, etc. Do your children like remember that time? Have you ever gone back and discussed it with them? Like, do they see what's been happening, or is it just like this was just the way it is?
So maybe I overdid this, but the Betty Ford Children's Program, which I highly, highly recommend, my guys were 3 and 5. And I went, oh my gosh, we've got to help explain this to them. We've got to figure this out because you've got 23 months of separation and you've got two little
Mm-hmm.
boys going, where's daddy?
Yeah.
Right? What's going on with daddy? Why am I over here with daddy and then over here with you? And
Mm-hmm.
like this. So we started with them then. And they have some really great materials on explaining you can love the person and hate, they use a disease model, and hate the disease. So
Mm.
they're separating out the person from the disease of what's going on. And then they send them home with kind of cartoony style books and a stuffed animal and all these things. And what it does is, in a lot of alcoholic families, you're told that your feelings are not real and that what you saw is not what you saw, but this is really what's happening. And so that confuses a child. So we spent a lot of time working on feelings and what you are feeling. In fact, we had pictorials, we had paper plates with smiley faces and some with angry faces and some with, so that you could point to all that. Because remember, these guys are little. Then we did that same program again, and my husband came that time. And there's a lot of healing processes where you write letters to each other, where you fill each other's cup, where you do these service pieces for each other. So we've talked about it all the way through. And then when we started the Celebration Recovery group, that's a Christian-based 12-step group that's biblically based, and it's for the whole family. So you go and you have dinner. The adults go to their programs, the children's go to what's called pre-covery, which is
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting philosophy. This has been really open in our family. Now, have we prevented this from happening? Who knows? Their life is still yet to live. But we've opened the conversation. We said, look, we we have been really open that we have failed. We have done things that we wish never happened, that we have created issues for ourselves by running to resources instead of the source.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hoping, especially as my 18-year-old gets ready to leave, what I know will happen is that he knows that we have been through this. So as he's struggling with these things, he can come back and talk to myself or my husband and say, hey, what was this really like for you? Kind of the questions that you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
And if he gets to that gift of desperation, he reaches out either to us or a group or a church or somebody and says, I need help. Now, right now, he's handsome and tall and smart and he knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that
Don't
was
they
it.
all? Yeah.
So, yeah, they've been through the journey with us. It'll be probably another 10 years before we get a full understanding of what they really understand. But
Yeah.
they're very aware at this point.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's amazing because I think sometimes, it's hard to talk to your children about that stuff, you know? I think you just want your children to think of you as so infallible, but you're not.
Well,
Just
let me share this story with you. So, my oldest turned 17, all-star football player. His grades are fine. He's just powerful. He's a great kid, but he's pushing at the ends of the envelope. Why
mm-hmm.
can't I stay out till 1? What do you mean I have to come home now? What do you mean I can't have the car when I want? He's just pushing all of this. So we're at the dinner table. The youngest is gone because he doesn't want anything to do with this. And Jerry and I both look at him and we go, okay, slow down. We have been 17, but we've never raised a 17-year-old. we're not exactly sure what to do here. We need help. You are almost an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help us figure this out? So that's what program has given us, and that's what working with therapists and coaches has given us, is the ability to say, dude, we don't have all the answers. Help us here. What is it you're really asking for?
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to accommodate you, but as parents, it's just like when you're walking the dog. We can see up here and you can see right here. So work with us on that. And
Yeah.
that it can be humbling, but it can also be one of those huge turning points, because he kind of sat back and went, they really don't know what they're talking about. Like, you're right, we don't.
Yeah. Oh man. So one of the things that kind of interests me about your story is you lived this experience of addiction and then you made it your work, which is kind of sometimes I meet people and they're just like, yeah, I went through this experience and I did my work and I'm just dumb. I don't want to have to go back and revisit these different areas of my life, etc. So what motivated you to make it your work? And is it difficult at times?
Sometimes it's very difficult when it comes really close to home, when the story is very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I must say, the path is very similar for most people, but your particular issues are your particular issues and they're huge to you. Whereas I may be able to see them as, that's not as big as you think. We can
Mm-hmm.
normalize that a little bit. So that can be a struggle. Why I did it was, again, a calling, because what I saw with my children,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there is so much that can be helpful with the family, and it's actually out there if you can get someone to help you find the right places and get out of yourself enough. And so those two little boys, they're out there everywhere. I see them everywhere. And I'm like, those two little boys or two little girls or whoever they are born into a situation that's not of their making. How do I serve people so that the next generation and the generation after that, we can break this? We don't have to stay stuck in it. We can figure out what the next one is, because my boys are going to go out and seek wives.
Yeah.
I want those wives to have had the opportunity to work on themselves and work through things, rather than doing like I did. They call it trauma bonding now, bonding through the trauma
Mm-hmm.
rather than through a healthy whole person. Because I don't, this I think is ridiculous. And you talked about this too. Yes, you come and there is a joining and a teaming,
Sure.
but you're not supposed to. I had two little pieces that I forgot to grab. You're not supposed to come and marry your holes up so that you're just more holy than, and it's
Yeah.
HOLE. You're just more holy than you started with.
Yeah.
God designed it, in my understanding, that a whole person and another whole person join together and make this holy new thing.
Yeah.
HOLY,
LY. Yeah.
holy new thing. And it's not that I'm giving up me and you're giving up you, but in teaming together, we're creating this even more exciting thing.
Yeah.
But it's not about, you need to. Jerry Maguire just bugs the bejesus out of me. You complete me. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You're creative, resourceful, and whole just as you showed up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need you, Mr. Cruz, to complete me.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Hollywood feeds us this line of, oh, you've got to find your soulmate, you've got to find. Da, 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 da. No, you need to find you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I do this work, is how do you find you so that your cup overflows and you can create wholly new things with other people.
Yeah, I agree, as you well know. Which kind of brings me to this question that I ask all my guests, and it's a little bit related because it's about joy, and it is, what is a weird habit or ritual you have that makes your life more joyful?
My son called me out on this the other day. And I'm like, you are absolutely right, and I'm not giving it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I adore chocolate. I adore really high-end chocolate, but
Mhm.
I also have hit that point in my life that, well, sugar's not good for any of us, but where sugar just will take me down.
Yeah.
And so he said to me the other day, because I was getting on him about something. He said, "Well, you couldn't live without your chocolate." And he's right. So, and I even have it right here.
Yeah.
I will make, either in the morning or in the evening, I will make it's cocoa powder,
Mhm.
hot water, and then some type of plant-based creamer that
Mhm.
I will pour in there. And I didn't realize until he called me out on it how ritualistic it is for me. I will sit, I will breathe, I will drink it. My mind will calm down. So if you want to call it an addiction, I'm right there with you on that. But it's a very strong ritual for me
Mhm.
if other people are noticing, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a little weird because it has no sugar in it. It has basically just hot water in it, no milk. It's getting me to the point where I can do it without the food guilt that goes with the chocolate cake, chocolate ice cream, bonbons,
Yep.
all those things.
Man, that's a great one. I love myself an occasional chocolate treat too, so I cannot relate. Um, Tanya, it was a pleasure having you. And if you're out there and you'd like to hear more from Tanya, you can check out her website at www.tanyagioia.com, where you can see her latest program, Dancing with Joy, where she teaches you to do less and connect more so you can create a family legacy of joy. She's also offering a special gift for you guys. It's her Sober on Purpose Family Guide, linked for you below in the show notes. As always, I'd love to hear from you about this episode. What is your experience with addiction? Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Farrah Haidar. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll get notified when the next episode is available. Also, I'm giving away a PDF of some of the best quotes we've had on the show, beautifully designed to print and journal your thoughts. Email me at farrah@farrahhaidar.com and title it Quotes. Talk to you soon. Till then, chase your happy.